Live now, Chair.
Perfect, thank you. So, welcome, members. Welcome to this place board meeting, the final one before the election. I can sense all the nervousness in the virtual room right now. Item number 1, substitutes. Do we have any substitutes or apologies for absence? No?
Chair,
Okay.
apologies.
Yep.
Sorry, apologies, Chair. Apologies for absence, but from Stephen Lee, if they hadn't already been mentioned.
Perfect. We'll note that. Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Item number 2, members' interest. Does any member have an interest about anything on the agenda at all? I don't know if I should. It's not really an interest, but I'm involved in the local plan hearings. I might as well mention that, put it on record.
Likewise.
Yeah.
But amongst that number, there were not people who this time last year
Oh.
were fighting for ISIS.
Could everyone mute them?
Likewise as well.
Yeah, likewise. Perfect. If there's
Chair,
Councillor?
I declare I'm not a member of the committee, but like others, I'm involved in the local plan, but I guess the whole council is.
Yeah. We'll all declare an interest. Okay then, item number 3, admission of the public. We're on YouTube. The public are here. Item number 4, minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any comments on the minutes? No. In that case, I move them as an accurate record. Can I have a seconder, please? Yep, Councillor Young. All those in favour? Right, and that is unanimous, I believe. Okay then, item number 5, the petition. Now, before we get on to item number 5, actually, I've got an important thing to reference now. We are actually in the pre-election period, and it's quite a serious matter because it means that we have to be incredibly mindful what we say in this public forum. I've asked Mr. Hughes to just to summarise what this means for us for this meeting. Ian, could I pass it over to you?
Yes, thanks, Chair.
It's 29th.
The Local Government Act of 1986 actually provides that councils shouldn't publish or put out any information or material in whole or in part which appears to designed to support to offer public support for a particular party. So that applies at any time. The Local Authority Code of recommended on publicity indicates that at this time, the heightened sensitivity during the pre-election period, which started in Calderdale today, means that we have to be particularly careful as a council to not promote the views of any particular party, either through allowing politicians to do so on a platform such as this. It doesn't prevent discussion taking place. It doesn't prevent the conduct of business that needs to be conducted. But it does mean that there needs to be care so that we don't inadvertently influence the views of a particular section of the electorate, which is regarded as a view that is being expressed on behalf of the council, which needs to remain politically neutral. So discussion can take place, and it's appropriate that it does so, but if members could be careful, please, not to express overtly political views about any of the items up for discussion this evening. I'll step in if required, but I hope that won't be necessary.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you, Ian. Not only obviously is it a legal responsibility, but I also think it's fair, given that we're close to an election. It's quite a fair rule to follow. Not only, of course, we do need to follow it because it's the law as well. Okay then, so item number 5, the petition. Savington Activity Centre. Now, probably the best way to deal with this, I'll first of all go to the petitioner, and then I'll go to the cabinet member. We'll open it up to questions, and then we shall go back to the cabinet member, back to the petitioner, and then if there's any recommendations, we'll take them from there. What I would note at this point is obviously this is a scrutiny panel, and our powers are limited. Essentially, we can only we can do a few things, but we can take things upstairs. We can by that I mean take things to cabinet. We can make recommendations. We can make recommendations to officers, but we can't change policy. And the other thing that I'd comment as well at this stage is that the decision effectively has already been made. I think it's fair to say that. So therefore, I just want to make that clear, just to manage expectations of what can be achieved in this scrutiny meeting. Do we have a petitioner here? Is that Mr. I've got Mr. Regan, but is there a petitioner online? Mike?
I spoke to Mr. Regan this morning. He's unable to attend because he's working this evening.
Yeah.
And hasn't got access to he can't use, he's at work, he can't use Zoom. He was going to try and ring round a couple of the people who signed the petition with him to get them to attend. But it appears that he hasn't been able to do that. I also thought, I'm sorry, I can't see everybody's attendance. I thought that councillors Lambert and Councillor Sutherland had requested to attend for this discussion, and I can't see them in the room.
No, we've got Councillor Wilkinson. Which item was it you were interested in?
It was this item, Chair.
Yeah.
I'm here as a cabinet member, not a ward member, along with Councillor Lynn.
Yeah.
Also here on behalf of cabinet. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Well, in that case, if we don't have the petitioners, obviously we've read the brief within the information pack that we'll provide you with. Shall we go over to cabinet members?
Yeah. Sorry, Chair. Can I just also say Councillor Clark is trying to get into the meeting apparently. Who's a ward member? Don't know if she's on place scrutiny or whether she's just attending as a ward member, but she's trying to get in.
Yeah, thank you. It's attending as a ward member. She's not in the room currently. Could maybe someone get in touch with Councillor Clark? Is that okay?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Chair. I'll get in touch.
Thank you very much. But to move things along, let's go to the cabinet members. I know you don't really have much to respond with here, but Councillor Lynn, would you like to proceed?
Yes, I would. Thank you very much, Chair, and apologies for being a little bit late arriving. I had some difficulties getting into the call. Yes, well, I mean, we haven't got anybody from the petition, but the petition is quite clear, really, and it says, save Mixenden Activity Centre, keep it in council ownership and keep it in the community. And I think what I'm hoping I can convince you as members of this scrutiny board tonight is that actually that is exactly what we want to do. And I wonder, Chair, before I move on to talking about how I hope I can convince you that actually we are in the process of trying to respond to the spirit of this petition. I wonder if it would be acceptable to you if I invite Councillor Wilkinson to say a few words, because I think it would be useful for him to just set the scene as far as how we've got to this position goes on, and then if it's all right with you, I'll carry on just for a few minutes and say a little bit more about what it is that we're hoping to do to satisfy the petitioners. Would that be okay, Chair?
That sounds like a great plan. Councillor Wilkinson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Lynn. Yeah, so the decision to cease the council's open access youth provision has impacted the finances of the Mixenden Activity Centre. And that's why I'm here, really, just to pick up on that. Although I would point out that was only part of the centre's income. and when the building was transferred to public services, that funding was only guaranteed up to 2018-19, but nonetheless it is part of the reason, obviously, that's been given as to why the centre has not been financially viable. And I've noticed that the future of the centre has been subject to quite a lot of debate recently in the press and on social media, etc. So I just wanted to set out sort of how we've got here, really. The decision to make the changes to the youth service delivery were as a result of a CYP scrutiny report on the youth service. There was a detailed scrutiny review which concluded in December 2019, and it was a very good piece of work, and obviously members from all parties and beyond were part of that review. And its recommendations, there were quite a few of them, but it included that the service needs to make better use of the money it spends on staff and reduce casual staff and contracts for a few hours a week. And it also said the service is wasting money on some of its buildings and needs to adopt a more efficient approach to the use of buildings. And the key recommendation, number 7, really, was that council youth workers should take a targeted approach aimed at the most in need. Universal youth services should be commissioned from the community and voluntary organisations. So that's precisely what we're doing in CYP. We're implementing those recommendations as set out by CYP Scrutiny. So I have to say it's quite infuriating to see some opposition councillors on social media, etc., sort of berating the council for basically implementing the very recommendations that their own members helped to come up with. And finally, I would just point out that it has always been our intention, as Councillor Lynn has said, to keep this centre open and to work with the community to make that happen. And again, that's precisely what we're doing. So I'm confident that hopefully we should have something up and running that will involve youth provision reasonably soon. And I'm sure Councillor Lynn will now want to set out more on how we're working towards that. So thank you.
Yes, I'm just mindful about what I mentioned about the pre-election period as well. Just incredibly mindful about that point. I want to be incredibly fair in this meeting. Councillor Lynn.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much, and thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. That was really useful. Right, okay. So what's happened since the decision which was taken as a result of the future council report being released for implementation, which included saying that we were going to kind of look for a new future for the Mixenden Activity Centre. Well, what was very positive was that Councillor Sutherland and the other two councillors for the ward hosted a public meeting on the 23rd of February, which was very well attended, really. Obviously, it was a public meeting online, but there were about, I would say, 30 to 35 people there. And it was quite a thorough-going discussion, really, with quite a lot of people there. And I think that overwhelmingly, really, what the people on the call were saying was that they wanted the building to be available for community, and with any activities that were going on there to be affordable to the local community, and really to kind of, for it to be very much to become again the heart of the community. It was also interesting that at that meeting, there were a few people on that call who had joined it because they were interested in putting forward ideas about what could happen in the Mixenden Activity Centre. And we're really keen to sit. I mean, we've taken as our brief from that meeting and that consultation with interested local people that what we had to do was to find a way in which we could respond to that, to their concerns. So I'm pleased to say that we are in discussion at the moment with 2 or 3 organisations that are really keen to work in Mixenden with the local community, and would also welcome opportunities to make the building available to local community organisations and so on as well. And to give you an idea of this, now I have to say that nothing is signed, sealed and delivered, and we are still in the process of negotiation. But if I tell you that among the sorts of organisations that have expressed an interest in working alongside the community in Mixenden would be West Yorkshire Police, who run an early intervention operation at Sunnyvale, and are already in the habit of running kind of family activity days with where families can get involved in kind of exciting activities. New Ground, who work with who do I suppose detached youth work, if you like, already operating in the area, and they're the charitable arm of Together Housing, and Yorkshire Water, who of course have an interest because of the water beside the near to the centre, and we also had an interest expressed at the event by the Canoe Club, who thought that it would, they'd like to be interested in that. So those discussions are ongoing at the moment, and I have to say that in terms of the soundings that we've taken from local people, people felt that many of those organisations, if we were able to come to an arrangement with them, would be providing and offering just the sorts of family activities and activities for young people that Mixenden would welcome. I think in addition to that, it's important to say that last year, Mixenden Library was burnt down, and which was a real loss because there was quite a few things as people used to know before the pandemic, used to go on in there, like, internet use and job clubs and parent and toddler groups and so on and so forth. So what we're hoping we can do, and we're on with that at the moment, is looking at how we could, on a temporary basis, adapt Mixenden as a part of the building, a Mixenden Activity Centre, which we believe would be very suitable as a temporary library and a base for carrying out some of those sorts of activities with, as I say, job search, use of the internet and so on, and other things that people might want to do in the library. And so we're working quite hard to try to see if we can bring that forward, hopefully in the summer, once things are able, if the government's roadmap all's good, we're able to do that. Now, all of that is very much a temporary proposal, because as you know, the process of developing the Mixenden Hub, which includes health facilities and other facilities, and a new library for Mixenden, that is still on course to be getting underway later this year. But as is always the case with new build projects, it can take a long time, and we're determined that people in Mixenden are not going to be without a library until the Mixenden Hub is complete. So that's really where we're up to. So in terms of what the petitioners were asking us for, what I hope, I'm not here to be able to make guarantees about exactly when this will happen, but all I can say, and I'm very grateful for the work being put in by colleagues in the Community Asset and Facilities Management section in CAFM. Steve Hoyle is I know on the call for a later item, but I'm very grateful to Steve and his colleagues because they've been working very hard, and we are in the process of trying to engage in discussions with some of the organisations that have expressed an interest in it. So I hope very much that what the petition was saying is save the activity centre, keep it in council ownership and keep it in the community. And that business about keeping it in council ownership, at the moment we have no intention of selling it or sending it anywhere else or anything. Our intention is that we would like to be able to achieve an agreement with an anchor tenant, be that the early intervention group or be that New Ground or anybody else, that would be willing to work in partnership with some of the other community organisations and so on that have expressed an interest in the activities end of the centre, if you like. And meanwhile, in the other side of the centre, we want a temporary library. I'll leave it there, Chair. I hope that's given enough information as a starting point for discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you very much. Members, if you've got any questions, would you like to pop into the chat? But is there someone who wants to kick off? Councillor Kavanagh.
Thanks, Chair. Just wanted to say that it sounds really excellent, everything that you proposed, Jenny. particularly I know that the early intervention work that is done is really valuable in terms of young people that might be getting into potential trouble or entering the criminal justice system, and I think it's massively valuable. So I would really support that kind of West Yorkshire Police being potentially one of the anchor organisations. I think it's really great, and particularly when we've had media coverage this week around how outdoor education centres everywhere have not been supported during lockdown, and the fact that they really support vulnerable young people and the outcomes for young people, and actually those centres not being supported is going to have a disproportionate impact on vulnerable young people. So I think everything that you've suggested sounds really excellent, so I would support it.
Very good. Any other questions? I know as well, Councillor Sutherland and Councillor Clark are in the meeting. If you've got any questions, do you want to just pop in the chat? Or just wave your hand. Councillor Clark. And then Councillor Sutherland.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I just want to say that also Ash Green Primary School are also very interested in some sort of use. I don't think they quite see the vision yet, but they're very interested in being part of this renewal of Mixenden Activity Centre. We certainly need to bring something back to Mixenden. There is nothing there at the moment, and we need to do it quite quickly, I think.
Perfect. I'll get thank you, Councillor Clark. I'll get Councillor Sutherland in, and then possibly Councillor Lynn, would you like to come back in? Councillor Sutherland.
Thank you for inviting me in, Chair. And one of the joys of being online is that I picked up that you might have mentioned my name and that I wasn't present. So I do have my daughter tonight. But when I heard you mention my name, I thought I would pop in to join the meeting and contribute. So I wouldn't want anyone to think that we don't take this very seriously as an issue in our ward. As I'm sure Jenny has mentioned, and I did have a conversation with Jenny earlier, there has been a lot of progress, and I think that we can come out of this with a better solution, and I think it's going to take the council being bold, but I think that there's an opportunity here for an excellent project that involves the police and involves other partners and makes the most of the facility for the whole of Calderdale. So I apologise that I missed the start of the introduction. I wasn't originally planning to join, but Jenny has been keeping me very well briefed on what they're up to, and I'm very hopeful that some of these exciting things will come forward. That was it. I won't really say anything other than that, other than we and the residents will be continuing to sort of hope to have a part and play a role in contributing to the development of it.
No problem. Thank you very much. Councillor Lynn.
Yes, I'm very grateful to Councillor Clark for mentioning Ash Green and Mungo Shepherd, who was on that call at the community meeting and was extremely enthusiastic and wrote afterwards to say that he really wants to be involved, not just from the school point of view, but as always, he's incredibly supportive of things going on in the community. So yes, I think it is really important. I think I'm very pleased that we've been able to have this discussion today, and it's all systems go, really, and I'm looking forward to it. And I actually think, in a way, that we could be at the start of a kind of revitalisation of Mixenden Activity Centre, particularly if I'm grateful to Councillor Kavanagh's comments about early intervention, because like her, I was thrilled when I heard about it as a possibility. Obviously, we've still got to dot the I's and cross the T's in terms of getting an agreement with one or other of the organisations that are expressing an interest in it, but I'm reasonably hopeful that we can do that before too long. And I think that Mixenden Activity Centre has got a good future, and that's what I wanted to say in response to the petition that you've been asked to consider tonight, Chair. Thank you.
No problem. Mr. Mellor, I know you put a comment in the chat, but do you want to come into the actual meeting?
I can join you through audio if that's okay.
Yes, yeah. Over to you.
So I'm a lecturer at Calderdale College, as I posted in the discussion, and over the last few years we've built up a really good relationship with the activity centre. I'm the course leader for public services and outdoor education at Calderdale College, and you'd be far fixed to find another centre in such a beautiful location with the amenities and the access to water anywhere else closer to Halifax. We actually store our kayaks at the centre, our kit and equipment, and we have a close relationship with the team at the outdoor centre. And I'm just hoping, sorry, I did join the call late, so I missed the first part of it there. I'm just hoping that this can continue to be a viable option, because it's an absolute necessity for local children, for local young people to have access to those sorts of facilities that nowhere else local can provide. I'm sorry if I've covered anything that may have been already said there. Like I said, I did join late there.
No, that's good. That's a good insight. Thank you, Mr. Miller. I'll go back to Councillor Fenton Glynn, and then I've got a quick question, then over to a cabinet member. Councillor Fenton Glynn.
I mean, I think it's more of a comment than a question, but it's kind of mainly, I'm just really pleased to see that actually, against the background of the kind of cuts that we've seen in Calderdale, that we are actually positive.
Yeah, that's the sort of comment that can't be made during this pre-election period, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Sorry, it was more just a kind of factual thing that there's been some cuts in Calderdale, but that's fine.
Yeah, but it's not. It's because it's a council communication that it's not. You know. Yeah.
Okay. I think I think it's really positive to see that we're coming together and getting the best outcome for the community. I'd just be interested if it's good that this has happened and it's sort of kind of come out of a crisis, really, but it'd be good to see if there's much read across for this, for some of the other things, that some of the other kind of community assets, and how are we engaging other networks. I mean, Yorkshire Waters will only be interested in a limited number of assets, but like particularly the police and other kind of community engagement. I'd just be really interested in how we can kind of build on that experience to sort of help some of our other community assets in the same way as we've been able to support Mixenden Hub this way.
That's a good question. Then can I add a question onto that? I think we're coming to the end of the discussion, to be honest. But my question is, obviously there's some really positive conversations happening at the moment between the council and various stakeholders. Is there a deadline for these conversations to be had and to be either a decision to be made? Are we working to a deadline here? So over to Councillor Lynn.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, well, first of all, the discussion with partners is going to take it's going to take a little bit of time, and the answer to your question, Chair, is no. I haven't set a deadline on it, but what I have said is there is an aspiration that we want things to be starting happening for people this summer. To some extent, and I know we're talking about outdoor activities. There's mention was made, and I'm very grateful to Mr. Mellor for his comments about the outdoor activities and so on there, and storing kayaks. And yes, I hope very much, excuse me, that will be something that we can that will be able to be continued. And as I mentioned, I think there was somebody there who was saying, it'd be a great base for the canoe club and so on as well. There was somebody local there. So yes, so first of all, as far as Mr. Mellor is concerned, yes, we would certainly hope that anybody that decides to become an anchor tenant of the building we will hope very much that they will be open to approaches from other organisations, and particularly where there is an existing use. And as far as Chair, your question about it, about the deadline, no, we haven't. As I say, I haven't set a deadline, but the government roadmap says that hopefully by the end of June, we can be doing things indoors as well as outdoors in more numbers, subject to the science and all the rest of it. So in a way, we're hoping that we want to have a good summer at Mixenden Centre. And finally, in response to Councillor Fenton Glynn's point about about talking to other partners, I mean, we are working as much as we can really with partners for some of the other assets that are that are being considered for community asset transfer, and each one of them is different. So I can't really go into details about those, but yes, certainly where there is interest. But I think but Mixon is a very special community, and that came out really, really clearly in the community meeting that Councillor Sutherland chaired. And people were talking about, having got married in the building, having done lots and lots of things in the building, but there was a sort of general recognition that to some extent, it needs a fresh start, and people were enthusiastic about having a fresh start. I already mentioned Mr. Shepherd, the head teacher, but other people had, offered to help and so on as well. So I think if we were able to have the early intervention from the police and the work from New Ground with the outreach work for young people, I think it's got a good future. And as I said, on a temporary basis, you're going to be able to go to the library hopefully before too long. Thank you.
Good. Perfect, thank you very much. Councillor Wilkinson, then ask for recommendations, if any are forthcoming.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just in response to Councillor Fenton Glynn's comments, I mean, the sort of partnership working is very much in line with our aspirations for the youth service. I think we've realised as a council, with the resources we've got, we can't do everything by ourselves, and actually the provision from some of our partnership organisations and the third sector is actually sometimes better than what we can deliver. And not only that, but they can actually tap into a lot of funding that the council can't do. So I think what we need to do is just support those organisations in accessing that funding, and realise it, making them aware of what's available out there. And I just finally wanted to just echo what Councillor Lynn has said, and just say, make it clear that this is an absolute priority for us as a cabinet. And I've met with Councillor Lynn to discuss it today, and I know that Councillor Scullion's also taken an interest. So we are very much committed to trying to get something off the ground by summer. Thank you, Chair.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We have a recommendation from Councillor Young. I think I know what it is.
Thank you, George. Well, it's quite good to hear from the cabinet members about their enthusiasm for the Mixton Activity Centre, and if we can run it a different way, that's a really positive thing for the community up in Mixton. So I think we should note the petition, but be encouraged by the fact that it's not the end of the road for the activity centre. It could be a new beginning.
Yeah, I'll second that. Do we have any amendments? No. Right, we'll move to the vote then. All those in favour, please show. All those against. Right, and that's carried. Perfect. Well, thank you very much. That's been a really helpful discussion. So thank you very much, and thank you to Mr. Mellor as well. That was a good contribution. So thank you. Okay, on to item number 6, community asset transfers. Sean, Stephen, are you there? Hello, welcome. Thank you. Is it Councillor Lynn? Would you like to take the lead, and then do you want to filter onto officers if you see fit, or would you prefer Sean to?
Chair, I think that if Sean's able to forward that, to take that on, I think that would be correct. And also, in a sense, this discussion focuses on the, if you like, the technicalities of the community asset transfer policy. So it might even be, I don't know if Councillor Scullion's on the call, but it might even be more appropriate, because this policy is being developed and implemented by CAFM. It might be more appropriate for you to go to Councillor Scullion. I'm happy to intervene as and when. Thank you.
That's okay. Of course, Councillor Scullion's on the call. She's a big fan of the place board. So okay, then we'll go on to Sean.
Apologies, Chair. Well, I don't want to pass the buck, but I think it. So Steve Hoyle is the lead for CAFM, for the community asset transfers. We work really closely together, but Steve is the author of the report, and I think would be the appropriate person to lead this off. And obviously I will provide any support and answer any questions in relation to the community support side of this.
That's perfect.
So I'll hand over to Steve. Thank you, if that's
Steve,
all right.
yeah. over to, obviously we've read the report, Steve. Is there anything in addition?
I don't think so, Chair. I think that it's obviously quite a short report to give the basic background as requested, and I've touched there on some of the the issues and the lessons learned as was requested. I've also then touched on the information that we've taken and the lessons we've learned from the libraries and the public halls community asset transfers. So I think really it's a case of if there are any questions, more than happy to try to answer those.
Yeah. Thank you, Stephen. Are there any questions? Councillor Smith? If other members would like to indicate in the chat, that would be fantastic. Councillor Audrey Smith.
Yeah, just to say, I think it's really encouraging to see this being looked at and set out and talked about more sort of openly. I think it's also great that you've covered a lot of the learning points from previous asset transfers where things have obviously gone wrong. My one slight concern is the involvement of the VC. I always get muddled up. The Voluntary Sector Alliance, the North Bank Forum, whatever. I just think it would have been quite nice for them in a way to be here to maybe talk about how they feel, because they're going to be the ones that are going to be relied upon to support these projects. And I just want to know how they feel, if they feel that they've got the resources to do that, because it is very resource intensive.
It is. Who's best placed to answer that one? Is Sean?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Smith. I think that's a really good question. So as part of so I manage the contract for the voluntary sector support, which is what the VSI Alliance is, and it's made up of, I think you all know, I've been here before with some of the partners involved in that, so I think you're quite familiar with the organisations and some of the work they do. I think, as I've put in the report, so I contributed a little bit towards this report, and Steve and I have discussed it and have worked with the Alliance and with members of the Alliance over a long time now, supporting asset transfers from right at the very beginning all the way through to the end and beyond. And I think certainly with the current work that's coming through in terms of asset transfers, what we've had to do is put in some additional resource, particularly from locality, who are an expert in asset transfers, to make sure that they can support the ones that are coming through at the moment. But I think, we've got ongoing meetings with them. I regularly meet with all with them. We have an Alliance leadership team which involves all members of the Alliance, including locality, and we flex the resources to where we need them at any one point. And I think that's one of the beauties of having an Alliance, is that we can, rather than having a kind of just an ordinary contract for support, we do have an ongoing discussion with them about what some of the priorities will be and where we'll need some additional work and additional support for communities in Calderdale. So I think that's been helpful for this piece of work and for the asset transfers and for the learning as we've gone through. We felt, I think, given where we are with the asset transfer at the moment, I think their capacity at the moment, I didn't really want to invite them along to this meeting. Normally they'd be absolutely happy to come to this meeting. They're really, really happy to come and talk to councillors about their work, and maybe later in the process or later in the year, at an appropriate point, I'm sure they'd be happy to come and talk about and answer some of your questions. And I think we will have to review how much time this takes as this over the next sort of 3 to 6 months, and during the year, how much capacity it takes to support the ones that are going through the process at the moment. I think it depends. It depends very much depending on the complexity of the asset and the complexity of and how developed a group is. So just to listen to the conversation about the Mixington Activity Centre, you've got some really well established organisations there who are involved in discussing how they might take a role in running Mixington Activity Centre. Those are organisations which probably won't need a huge amount of support to take on the running of a building, a facility like that. Although there may well be some lessons learned, and I think there always are lessons learned from other asset transfers. but some of the smaller groups, you know, really early groups or friends of groups who might want to develop into running an asset, you know, some of the ones we've had in the past do need a lot more support. And we always try and do that from a point of view of people going in with their eyes open as much as possible. And that's definitely one of the key bits of learning. So I don't know if that answers your question. I think, yes, we are really conscious of the resources we need to do this. It's a big job. But the flexibility of the contract we have with them and the alliance means that I think we can respond. But I certainly will be asking them how that's going and getting feedback on what they need and if they need additional support or there are challenges that they pick up that they need more support from the council to help make those any asset transfers that we progress as likely to succeed as possible. I think that's the thing.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Councillor Caffrey.
Thank you, Chair. My comments on VISI are very positive. They've been very helpful to us. They've been to most of our meetings and supported us and given us advice on various stuff. So I'm very pleased with what they've put in, and you can pass that on. I'm quite enthusiastic about doing these cats. Probably more enthusiastic than the council, actually, I think sometimes. But I do find a bit of a pain, and I know Stephen Hoyle's found me a bit of a pain, Stephen, haven't you? But you're doing this because I think they get quite frustrated with the processes, and it takes so long, and it's so frustrating. There's so much red tape and so much paperwork, and it really does blow your head off. You've made a comment in there that it's going to still take about 18 months to do these cats, which, you know, there's lots to do. I accept that, but I'm going to localise this a bit. But I'm sure it applies to all the cats that are going on. If we've got to leave an asset for 18 months, some of them are just going to deteriorate. We've already got a bit of damp in the library in shelf. Now, if it's left empty for 18 months, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And also, you've got to think about, we've had COVID. Getting a group together from scratch has been virtually impossible. And we've got it now. I mean, some of it, we speak over the Zoom, but we haven't actually physically met some of us. So opening bank accounts, doing this, that, and the other has been very difficult. And I hope the council, I'm sure the council does appreciate it's not been easy to get these groups together. But the main concern is a lot of the groups that were using these buildings ain't going to wait 18 months. They're going to go and find somewhere else. So in the meantime, what do we do with them? Where do they go? After COVID, we're trying to get groups to come back together. And if there's nowhere to go, they're going to disappear. And we've got people lined up in this particular case, I'm sure the others have, to use the facilities. We're getting more and more interest by the day. But if we say to them, I'm sorry, but you've got to wait 18 months before you actually move into this building, they're not going to be very impressed. So I wonder if the council can come to some arrangement. I don't know what arrangement it would be, some kind of license to operate or whatever, to somehow keep these buildings going, even if it's a skeleton operation, so we can bridge this gap between starting the process and finishing the process. Now, I've been talking today to On Track, who you're probably aware of, who are interested in doing a deal with us, but that's going to take such a long time to put together. But we ain't going to do it quickly. It could be documentation. So really, what I'm saying is, how supportive is the council actually seeing these happen in the long term? And what happens to buildings in the meantime? How do we maintain them? How do we keep these groups enthusiastic? I know it's a difficult question, this, but I really want to know if there's going to be some support to actually see this process through. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much. Is that one for the cabinet?
That's one for anybody who wants to answer it, really.
Stephen.
If I can probably answer a couple of the points there for Councillor Caffrey, but some of the others are probably for councillors. In respect of the time scale, it is a lengthy time period. We're very aware of that, and that is there built into the process for a particular reason, to make sure that we have robust groups and that they are aware of the complexities of the buildings and that they're able to deal with getting themselves together in terms of own constitution and understanding what they need to have a good business case and for the CAP to be as successful as possible. In terms of the building in the interim, then as part of our team and the FM team, we will be retaining, services within the building. We will be, keeping the heating going and things of that nature. We're obviously will be reducing as much as we can in terms of the compliance if the buildings aren't being cost there as well. But as I say, in respect of any interim use, the decision has been taken to close the building. So that is, not something that I can comment on, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Do we have? Yeah, go on, Pete.
It's not just going to be this cat. There's going to be a lot of other cats with the same problem. How do you get people maintain interest in these things if you tell them 18 months before you can actually start using the premises? 18 months ish. I mean, I don't know the answer, but I'm hoping somebody can give me one as to how we maintain this. And we've got to rebuild from scratch in a lot of cases because a lot of groups have disappeared. So I've just thrown it up, really.
I think it's a good question. And maintenance of the building in the interim as well.
I want this really.
Do we have a response? I think that's more appropriate for a cabinet member, to be honest. Do we have? Councillor Scullion.
Thank you. And I do hear Councillor Caffrey's frustration, but it is the case that you can't just rock up to the council and get control of a public asset. There are processes that we have to go through, and we have to make sure that groups are properly constituted, know about all of the things like insurance, have a properly legal lease or license, etc., etc. And we are trying to support people. And one of the things that I think wasn't mentioned before, we mentioned the voluntary sector support, but we've also, in terms of our stronger asset transfers, they do provide as anchor institutions, as we call them, who work with the council and who've been through the painful experience of asset transfer. They do provide peer-to-peer support, actually. And I think that's very useful, really, in terms of, what happened when half your roof fell in and you had to find the money for that, or, how did you find the council were in electrical testing, or Legionnaire's disease, those kind of things. There's a lot of shared knowledge. And obviously that's for slightly more mature groups. But we've also, I think one of the reasons it's slow is that we have learned the lessons. We don't simply say to community groups now, here's the building and walk away. Actually, we are committed to making that a success because it's a public asset and we've got responsibility for it. And that's why in the report, Stephen and Sian and colleagues talked about the need for succession planning. You've often got an enthusiastic group of people, but they then get overtaken by illness or they move away. And actually the constitution and the maturity of that group and the skills that they've got as a group are particularly important. That's why I was interested to hear about Mixington Activity Centre in terms of some of the people involved in that. I think there is often some naivety about asset transfers and buildings. It's a bit like, I like eating and I like cooking, I'm going to open a restaurant, and you haven't actually got the people and skills to do the marketing and the accounting and the washing up or whatever. People are enthusiastic about buildings and they're attached to buildings in their place and they want to take them over, and yet it's a non-profit business and you have to do such a lot to keep that going. We are members of Locality, and there is advice from Locality as well. So there's the Voluntary Sector Alliance, there's Locality, the local representative from that, which I think has got very useful online information, and lots of people have been there before. So I would suggest peer-to-peer and mentoring approach in terms of working with those groups may be an avenue to explore, but I'm sure Sian Rogers can give you some pointers in relation to that. But we are committed to doing this. This is the game, this is what we're in. And the government, of course, have just announced the new Community Ownership Fund and the Community Renewal Fund, which are intended for exactly these kind of organisations. So I commend those to you as well. And again, the officers do have further details.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'm very aware of time. Time's moving on. I've got six members who would like to contribute. If you could make your submissions as succinct as possible, that would be really appreciated. Okay, Councillor Kavanagh.
Thanks, Chair. I'll try, but I've got 3 points, but I'll do 3 quick points. The first one is just a question about how have we actually improved how we assess skill and experience based on previous CATs that have failed. So what process are we going through now to make sure groups are really there, or whatever capacity building they might need to get there? And my second point is, are we now designing for flexibility? So based on some of the stuff that Councillor Scullion said, groups often change. So Hebden Bridge Town Hall, for example, I think Graham Minot told us once about the amount of trustees that they've had. So the initial people who are really enthusiastic then change to the people who take to the next stage, who then change to take to the next stage. So community groups are not like council teams, they're not static, they're really flexible. So we need to think of a way of designing for that flexibility. So I don't know if we're doing that. And then my last point is, do we have a system to predict potential future assets that might come up? And I'm saying that because of the point in your report, Stephen, about the fact that one of the issues is that it's often reactive. So groups are scrambling around really quickly to kind of go, we want to save the library, or, you know, we want to do this, and all of a sudden they put in a group together from scratch. But actually, if we knew, for example, this is obviously not happening as we know at the moment, but say, for example, we knew Tobden Hub Library in 2 years is going to go, we could have 2 years of really supporting a community group to get to that point where they could run it. So do we have a system to have more lengthy predictions of potential council assets that might be coming up?
Good questions. I think that's one for an officer. So it's about the skills and experience, the designing for flexibility, and predicting future assets. Do we have anything, Sean, Stephen?
Steve's got his hand up first,
Stephen,
so I'll let him go first. But I was,
If I'm okay to take the last one, Sean, and you take the first couple, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'm sure
that's
you
good,
might want
good
to
delegation there, Stephen.
We've worked together for a long time. Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Kavanagh. I think on the first one, yes, I think it's an ongoing. I would say an evolving how we assess capacity and skills of boards and groups, and it's also very specific to the asset. So, for example, what you'd need in terms of the skills and capacity for running a piece of land that you're going to turn into an allotment is probably going to be very different from if you were taking on a library. So there is a set checklist that we used for all of our assessments, and I think it's all shared how we do that on the websites for part of the pages when we look at an expression of interest, and we look at kind of governance and whether or not people have got the right policies and procedures in place, and all sorts of stuff. And part of the expression of interest, we always do a meeting as well, because some of it you can only really assess from talking to people. In terms of things that have changed, I think some of the big learning is, and I think it's alluded to in the report, is we don't have a kind of minimum size for a board, but we do try and make sure that there's enough capacity in a board to be able to manage the size of an asset. Because clearly, if a group is formed and there's only 3 people who are really, really committed to running an organisation, that probably isn't enough. If we're really honest, you do need more people to run groups and organisations. And we'd also look at the particular skills, and we'd ask them some questions about, have you got somebody who's got good finance skills? Have you got somebody? So one of the things that the VSI Alliance would do is they'd do a kind of a skills audit with a group, and that's a classic bit of use of information that we'd use to inform whether or not a group has got the skills it needs, and builds the awareness, because some of it's about groups over time building the awareness about what they need, and sometimes that helps they might not start by having all of those things, but they can go out and get those things if they understand what they might need. So I think if that's as good as I can give you, really. We do use a thing called the visible standard as a benchmark, and that's, again, it's quite well set out in the documents, which is a kind of a quality standard, which is a really good test about running community organisations. It's probably still the best one out there as at a basic level. And it's quite transparent, and you can look at the kind of what that asks for at a basic level without having to pay for anything. You can kind of use that as a good benchmark. In terms of designing for flexibility, I actually think that's more about post-transfer. So thinking about the example you gave with Hebden Bridge Town Hall, absolutely the people who were involved in taking on that building and campaigning to take it from the council in the first instance were not the people who then needed to be around the table to make that run. And I think that's a big bit of learning that we've all, Steve and I have talked about a lot, is making sure that for an organisation, for an asset transfer to be genuinely successful, we have an ongoing relationship with those groups and with those organisations and those buildings. And the Alliance and myself and Steve don't walk away at the time we give them the keys. There's a lot of work with groups beyond that, and some of that might be quite difficult stuff about supporting groups to change and get new trustees and look at that process. So I hope that answers the question.
Perfect. Stephen, did you say the third point you were answering?
The third point, yes. I think the point about do we have a system in place to predict the future assets that might be becoming available. I think the answer is we could have. We've tried to do this over a number of years with regards to the asset planning side of things, and it's something we have been trying to look at or trying to put in place, where we need to be more strategic with looking ahead at the buildings which are possibly going to be coming available, within the next year or two. And that's something that we have tried to put in place for some time, but it has been difficult to do that. And I think that's mainly around the services not knowing, in advance where their budgets are. We've done quite a bit of work in the asset review programme where we've clustered services together in certain buildings, so we've been able to do it in those instances. But I think we need to look at a more strategic approach, and then if we have that will also address part of Councillor Caffrey's point, where we're actually shortening the timescale because people have advance notice of that. So I think that's certainly something I've mentioned in the paper about a review of the policy. I think that's certainly something we need to look at introducing during that review.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Councillor Fenton Glynn.
Yeah, I mean, some of this has been covered, but I'm kind of thinking explicitly about kind of learnings that we have from kind of experience of asset transfers. And in my ward, we've had a very successful asset transfer in terms of the Hebden Bridge Town Hall, and the kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, a not successful asset transfer with Youth House, which ended up being handed back. And I'd just say kind of using those kind of examples, but just more generally, like, what are the red flags you look for when something might not work? And what are the key elements of support that we are able to give as a council early in the process, just to ensure that things do work? And there may not be a simple answer to that, but I'd be kind of interested, as I say, kind of what are your red flags when you're looking at something thinking, actually, I don't think they are in a position to do this, and what are the key elements of support? And I take Councillor Caffrey's point that sometimes I know that council officers can it feels a bit like a boat in the sewers stopping anyone getting through. But I also recognise, having seen the other side of that actually these checks are really important, and why you want to make sure that people are in the right position to do that.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Stephen?
If I can just come in initially, I think it's important to say with community asset transfer that it is a real chicken and egg situation, because of the nature of the majority of the groups are startup groups. So to some extent, there'll always will be a leap of faith that the council has to take, and as well the community group. But the main things that we do look at are the robustness of the group in terms of kind of the capacity, but also the skills across the board, which makes sense. That there has to be some form of income stream coming into the asset transfer going forward, so that it's not completely reliant on grant funding or the ability to obtain that grant funding. And I think as well that there needs to be, it needs to touch and concern that kind of wider community as wide as possible, so that the more people from the community that we have engaging with the asset transfer going forward, the more successful that is likely to be. So I mean, that's just a few of the main points, really.
I think it demonstrates how important that board is, the expertise on the board, really.
Can I add one very specific thing, and it's about funding and the opportunities of funding. And I think sometimes it's just luck, which is if you are taking on a building at the time when there happens to be a big bit of funding, which happens to have been announced by a big external funder. And good examples of that, Sport England do have had bits of funding that they've released, and they've been really explicit that they want to work with community sports organisations taking on sports sites or sports facilities. And that has been a really helpful way, because we've had the funder enabling the asset transfers and supporting them in the startup stage. And some of the ones which have failed have just been really unlucky in terms of a landing, and then there hasn't been an appropriate funding source that might have been there 2 years before for some other ones. And I think that although I would absolutely agree with Steve, there is also then, it's not just one big lug of money, it has to then be complemented by some genuinely ongoing income revenue. And that's the other bit I would say, is people often think that there's going to be probably a bit over optimistic about where they can generate income. And I think it's hard to assess which of those are going to be successful compared with some of the others. But I think that bit of my word to anybody would be looking at these is really think about your incomes coming in.
And are the triggers that you see that worry, like if you're looking at a proposal, are there certain triggers that you'll see that will concern you, or is?
So if I'm honest, I think it is when you've got an awful lot of a number of potentially competing community spaces wanting to all make income off renting spaces. And I think post-COVID, that's going to be something that we need to be really aware of, is that a lot of people want to make, and absolutely want to be able to share and create community spaces. But if there's a lot of them and they're all hoping to be able to generate income off hiring community spaces to community groups who also don't have a lot of income themselves, that is not probably going to be enough to support a community building. And I think that's my one thing that I think we think about a lot when we look at the business plans is that our finance team are always involved in assessing applications and expressions of interest for asset transfers, and kind of trying to stress test that as much as possible. And I think that's the area,
commercial side, I guess. Yeah. Thank you.
A point in it about I think probably the most important thing is demonstrating cash flows, isn't it, really, and a regular source of income, whether that be direct debits via memberships or what have you. I think it's so important. Councillor Blackborough.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to come to this meeting tonight. I'd just like to thank the officers for the support they're giving to the various groups. I know there's an awful lot of work. People are very passionate about the buildings, but there's a lot of detail to go into that. So I'm quite delighted that the Big House Theatre Group and a church group have shown an expression of interest in the Big House Civic Hall. This is this is going to be an extremely complex case to work through, and I know officers are fully aware of that. And just to let you know, I'm working with the Big House Theatre Group. I work with officers. I work with whoever. Just a thought actually in relation to the relocation for customer first, and that is, why don't we use the bid office? So combine the bid office with the customer first. Because actually people going to the bid office not knowing really what it is, so a combination of the two might be quite good. The other point that has been raised, and I understand the difficulty and challenges of reopening these buildings, but for group to look at the income post-COVID is very challenging to actually see how much is going to be used, like the Big House Civic Hall, how many people are going to go back, return to the Civic Hall. So in some way, it's a real balance. And I understand the officers' difficulty in relation to being able to open these buildings, but equally on the other side, it's very difficult for a group to say, actually, our potential income from the different groups in the community is going to be X, Y, and Z. So just my points, which I just wanted to raise. So I very much appreciate your time, Chair.
No, very helpful. Very helpful. Was there? I think that there was some specific technicalities about the bid office there. Were you looking for a response on that, or is it just a point of to know?
I think it was a suggestion, because we're looking towards moving the customer first. I'm happy to say that we're hoping to keep the customer first in Big House, and I think it would be perhaps an opportunity to utilise the space, help with the bid income as well, really, in terms of the rental. So actually reduce the rental from the bid, but equally just involving the community in various ways. People come to customer first. Actually, what's the bid about? Oh, actually, it's about bringing people into the town. So it's a real combination of two things, really.
That's a good point. Is there any Zora's come on camera? Were you? Yeah, Zora.
Yeah. Just to say, we're looking at a number of different options that would be suitable for customer first. So we're happy to look at that one as well, Councillor.
Very good. Okay then, Councillor Holdsworth.
Yes, I just wanted to pick up, if I might, on Councillor Caffrey's point about the length of time it takes from the expression of interest from a community group to either a successful or an unsuccessful conclusion. And I wondered what communications were in place to encourage the original group to continue with their enthusiasm to the end, or to encourage new groups to put themselves forward to take on the buildings, and how the momentum worked in terms of trying to make these transfers as successful as Sian has indicated they can be, or may not be, depending on luck or not luck. So I just wondered how it worked.
Yeah. Who would like to take that one?
I'm not. I'll have a go, but I think this is. I mean, in terms of the ones that are carrying on at the moment, this is being led mainly by the service. So it's. I mean, we, in terms of the asset transfer process, Steve and I support that process from a kind of the point of view of both either the assets and the facility management and the from the voluntary sector support, in terms of supporting those groups that come forward. So the ongoing engagement is being led by the service that is in the process of potentially releasing those assets. So I think, I mean, there is ongoing conversation, I know, and engagement from the service with groups, but it is being led from that direction rather than from our side. That's probably about as best as I can answer that question, I guess. I don't know if Steve can. I mean, that groups have been emerging and then folding, and we have been. I know that from the VSI Alliance point of view, because I had a rundown from them of all the ones which are ongoing at the moment, that they are, if they've a group has gone cold, if you like, so an initial group has expressed an interest and there's been signposted to them, they have continued to get in touch and try and remind and say, is this something you want to continue with? But beyond that, then it's not their role really to try and initiate other groups if not other groups.
Yeah, I think building on Sian's point, it's got to be led by the potential board, hasn't it? Really, if a lead goes cold, then it's possibly not the best sign, really. Okay, Councillor Caffrey, did you have something to comment?
Yeah, it's just following from what I said last time. I mean, I'm not trying to trivialise the process. I understand that. I mean, last thing I want to do, or we all want to do, is look for get failures. And we're going to get failures if we don't do it properly. And I made clear to the groups I'm dealing with, it's got to be a robust and sustainable operation, you know. And I think I've made that very clear. The trouble is, there's so many unknowns at the moment following the crisis, that a lot of it is kind of guesstimates, and I mean, you're hoping that people are going to come back together. So my concern really is the interim period. Now, I know you can't answer that because you haven't answered it, and quite frankly, I don't know what the answer is, because it's just, to me, that there must be some way of operating these places, even on a skeleton way, we're keeping the same groups going or something, just to keep the momentum there. Otherwise, we're going to lose all these groups. There's nowhere to go. And I mean, at the moment, they're not bothered because they can't go anywhere. But suddenly when they can, they've got nowhere to go. So what are we going to do? And we're going to lose a lot of people. And a lot of people are going to suffer for it because they want to come back into society and there'll be nowhere to go.
I think that's a fair point, because the business case is built on that moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
And demand at that moment, essentially. And it's difficult to forecast where the demand goes. Do we have a response on that one? How do we keep that momentum there, for want of a better term, in the pre-election period? Councillor Scullion.
Yeah, I don't think, as Councillor Caffrey said, there isn't an easy answer. Any business case has got to look at the market as it were around it, and the markets change really, and the income sources change, and some open up and some close down. And it's just got to be sensitive to those things and to factor those things in. And I agree, there are a lot of unknowns at the moment. Over the next year, I think we will be very clearer about whether how long this living with COVID phase is going to be. And some plans are going to have to be pulled back, and perhaps a smaller scale in that interim, but leaving possibilities for expansion in the future. But there isn't any easy answer. Councillor Caffrey's quite right that it is unprecedented, and it does make planning very difficult at the moment. So haven't got a magic wand to wave over the current situation, but any group thinking about taking things over will be aware of that and will tailor their plans accordingly.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. I've got a final comment, then it's just a really quick question. I just want to really know how difficult it's been doing this within the COVID climate. I'm very much aware I've been involved in attempting an asset transfer, and it's been quite difficult conducting that market research because it's been online, and that's how I've had to do it. However, I'm very much aware that potentially the target audience for these community assets might not be online, so it's been quite difficult to reach them. So I just want to note that point. Regarding, I know in the report there's a few comments about it looks like there has been lessons learned from previous asset transfers. I was just wondering though, has the council actually been or discussed the failed asset transfers with the previous people who were involved in those projects, just to really understand their viewpoint? Has there been any discussions with the former boards of these assets? Yeah, Councillor Scullion, sorry.
John may be able to add to my answer. I mean, sometimes things have foundered on groups thinking that they could overcome legal difficulties, not being, sort of things getting into, excuse me, Mr. Hughes, getting into lengthy legal discussions and not coming to anything. And in the meantime, as Sian said, often sources of funding have dried up. And in other cases, the point that has been made a number of times in this discussion was about succession planning, that actually people have said we were overwhelmed by the responsibility, we were all elderly, there weren't new people coming along, and that's one of the reasons why we push the whole business about trustee membership. It's very interesting to note how quite often the Voluntary Sector Infrastructure Alliance and individual groups now are just advertising on social media, in the newspaper, saying we are looking for trustees for X. And actually, it's only when you ask people, they identify themselves, oh yes, you know, I could do that 2 days a week. So we are really pushing on the succession planning. That's one of the absolutely key things that we have realised. And the other thing is that we have learned the responsibility of running a building, and credit to Stephen and his officer colleagues, running a building from which you can do the activities you really want to do. Actually running a building itself is really a major responsibility. And we've now got much more systems in place in terms of making sure that, you know, those things continue for the community group. So those are the main things that we've learned, and we have spoken to groups who have walked away, come back again. You know, that there are as many different reasons why things fail as there are community groups and community buildings that people are interested in. But we really have come a long way in the last 10 years since asset transfer really has been a much more important part of local government life, and we're still learning the lessons, I'm sure.
Yeah, thank you. And it's just that, because I understand obviously the council have from the council's viewpoint, the council have its view of why certain things have failed, but I always think it's important to ask the other people on the other side to get their view as well. Sian, do you have anything to comment?
I'm just going to say, I think it's a very fair point, Chair, and I think sometimes we can ask groups because it's I would just be honest, and sometimes it's a mutually agreed end to a relationship, and sometimes it's not so you know, good, you know, it doesn't always end well, does it? And I think that's harder, and I think that's a harder conversation to have. But we do, I think, through, again, this is where it's useful having the relationship with locality and the VSI Alliance, who can maintain objectivity, and they sit as a neutral body between ourselves, the council and the group, and they can have conversations with groups about what's not working, what the barriers are, what some of the challenges are. And when relationships have been difficult, they have, and particularly locality, have stepped in and been able to play that role, and been able to you know, get feedback from groups when things were difficult, and sometimes those things are then moved on to become good, and they've been a successful asset transfer, so through the process. And sometimes they've been able to do a kind of post evaluation with boards, and that has happened and has informed our learning. And you know, for it, I would like to sort of thank her really, but Sophie Michelin, who worked for locality in Calderdale for a very long time, as some of you will know, and has recently gone back to France. She did she's you know, formally fed back to Steve and I some of she set up a community anchor network, which is what Councillor Scullion referred to. So some of our well-established long-term community asset transfers meet regularly, and that is supported by locality and by Sophie, and is now being passed over to a new member of staff from locality within the Alliance. And they frequently talk about some of the challenges and ongoing issues, and where they need more support, and where things have not gone so well. And they do feed that back to Steve and myself.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So on that note, I want to make a recommendation, and I want to first of all thank everyone across Calderdale who has been involved in discussions about asset transfers, or has tried to get an asset transfer off the ground to date. I think even if expressions of interest they're not submitted, hopefully they are, but even if they're not submitted, I think at least communities have explored the ideas and explored potential. So I'd just like to thank everyone involved. The other point is as well, I want to thank our partners, VSI, and locality. Specifically in VSI, I've had involvement with Cassandra and Jane, and they've been absolutely stand out. They really have. So I want to thank them for their ongoing support as well. Would anyone like to add anything onto that recommendation? Nope. Okay, can I have a seconder? Councillor Dickinson, do we have any amendments? Nope. In that case, I'll move to the vote then. All those in favour? Councillor Fenton-Glynn, do you? Yeah. Okay. All those against? Okay, that vote is carried. So thank you very much, and thank you to Sean, Stephen, for your contributions, and Zola as well. Thank you. Okay then, on to the next one, the local plan. Now that is item number 7. So we've got Richard. Richard, over to you.
Thank you. Am I okay to share my screen?
Yeah.
I know we tested it earlier, but
if you negotiate with
made the host.
Negotiate with Bazan on that one. There we go.
I think that's working. Can everybody see my screen?
We can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So this is basically an update on the local plan examination process to date. Excuse me, I've done it as a series of PDFs because it's a little bit more reliable than PowerPoint, which I know looks a bit more professional, but hopefully there's a lesser chance of the presentation crashing. So this slide just sets out a recap of the key milestones in recent years. So I started at August 2018 when the council resolved to publish the plan, although there was obviously a lot of consultation and discussion and work by the local plan working party prior to that date. So after at the point of submission, where we submitted it to the Secretary of State, the question of the soundness and legal compliance of the plan was effectively passed over to the planning inspector. So the planning inspector is a senior planning professional, essentially a civil servant appointed by the Secretary of State to examine the plan. Members will recall that between the stage 1 hearings, so they were in Shelf Village Hall. Seems like a long time ago when we were having face-to-face meetings in places like village halls, but that's what we used to do in the past. So after those hearings, the council needed to reconsider the housing requirement, and there was a further period of consultation early in 2020. And then we had stage 2 hearings during November, December 2020. They were all undertaken via Zoom, and the inspector wrote to us in the middle of January this year. So I think this presentation has been circulated to members, and there's a link on it that you should be able to click on, and that will take you through to the inspector's full letter. But I've pasted an extract of her letter, which essentially is signalling an intention, or rather a need, for a third stage of hearings that will have a particular focus on transport and housing supply. The letter then goes on to confirm that if the inspector concludes that the plan is potentially capable of being found sound and legally compliant, the council will then publish what are described as the main modifications. So those are the changes to the plan that are required to make it sound, and we would publish those for consultation for a period of 6 weeks. Now, there's currently a series of very focused consultations being undertaken, and these consultations are on evidence that was either produced during 2020, so during the run-up to the last set of hearings, or some documents that were submitted during those hearings. So there's consultation on those documents, and then there's also consultation on a number of documents that the inspector asked the council to produce during the stage 2 hearings. So again, some key issues really that came out of stage 2, the need to firm up the evidence and narrative around infrastructure, and we're currently consulting on documents relating to the strategic road network. Our consultants prepared a study essentially of the impact of the local plan on the operation of the M62. We've also recently published information on school place sufficiency. So our evidence at the examination very much focused on the southeast Calderdale area, but at the request of the inspector, we've worked with CYP colleagues to look at sufficiency across the whole of Calderdale. We're also expecting further evidence on air quality to be available soon. The inspector wants to see a 5-year supply of deliverable housing sites on adoption, and that work is continuing. And there's also some very technical work around habitat regulations assessment. And that essentially boils down to looking at the effect of traffic generated by development, both within Calderdale and further afield, and the effect that that traffic would have on the South Pennine Moors special protection areas. So the moorland upland in Western Calderdale that's that can be that's sensitive to nitrogen deposition. So in terms of next steps, stage 3 examination hearings are provisionally, and I say provisionally because it's not been fixed as yet, commencing week of 10th of May. We expect those hearings to be shorter and more focused than the earlier hearings, as some members will recall, especially if you were involved. I certainly was. The stage 2 hearings were over a period of about 5 weeks. So we expect stage 3 to be a lot more focused. The inspector will then prepare a report, and if she considers the plan is capable of being found to be sound and legally compliant, she will set out main modifications. I'm afraid my indication of timeframes is a little bit approximate here, so I would hope that we receive that during the summer of 2021. I appreciate that the notion of summer extends over quite a wide period, or maybe a very narrow period, depending on So we would then carry out consultation on the main modifications. That's a 6-week period. So if members recall, when we published the plan, it was effectively put out for 6 weeks. When we have the main modifications, we essentially go through a similar process where the modified plan is put out for comment. And in the light of the representations that are received, the inspector then decides whether she's in a position to conclude the process and declare the plan to be sound, or alternatively, she could decide that she wants to carry out further hearings. Again, so I've indicated autumn winter of 2021, and then if all of those previous steps go as we would hope, we then move to the stage of adoption, which would be late 21, early 22, and as I think members will be aware, that's a decision for the full council. In terms of the future, we still have the issue of community infrastructure levy. The same planning inspector has been appointed to examine the council's draft community infrastructure levy charging schedule. However, before going to such an examination, we would need to re-examine our evidence around financial viability. There's the issue of supplementary planning documents. There was obviously a decision by Cabinet and subsequently full council around SPDs and any development plan documents. And then just really on a concluding note, I think a point I keep making is that, of course, the local plan doesn't implement itself. It requires the council and the various people within the council, across officers and members, to think about how we shift into that sort of mode of implementation, both implementation from the point of view of the allocations in the plan for housing, employment and mixed use, but of course the whole issue of infrastructure delivery to support that implementation. So those are my slides. Am I okay to stop sharing?
Yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you, Richard. Thank you.
And as I say, I think that presentation has been circulated. So there's some links there you can click on if you want to have a look on the local plan examination website. But I'll try and answer any questions.
Perfect. Thank you. I'll ask before I go to members. Can I bring Ian in at this point, who has some written questions from the public, but they're going to be addressed outside by a written response?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think that's a very accurate summary. The questions we've had posed don't really pick up the agenda item in respect of the process and procedure that Richard has just very helpfully taken you through. There are very specific questions about aspects of the local plan, and they're more appropriately dealt with by way of written response, which will be sent back to the individuals who have sent them in.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Ian. Councillor Fenton Glynn.
Yeah, so my question may well be slightly too technical. I think what I'm interested in is when the local plan has hopefully been approved and we start to implement it, how we can kind of use it to make sure that we're using supplementary planning documents around kind of key issues like environmental impact, and also you'll understand I have a particular concern around flooding. And just, to how much more latitude it gives us. And, you spoke about moorland damage there. And I think that, again, is a key thing that it will have an impact on. But I just wonder, how much can we use those supplementary documents for that? And kind of what latitude do we then have after we've got this local plan through?
Well, the local plan is essentially the hooks that you would hang supplementary planning documents on. SPDs don't make or change policy, but they explain how policy will be implemented. So in that sense, obviously they're useful to people preparing planning applications, to members on planning committee determining applications, and hopefully also obviously to officers or people in the community who either support or oppose development in framing their representations. I think there is great potential to use SPDs to pursue the objectives that you've outlined, Councillor. I think what's really important is that we think really carefully about the scoping of SPGs and how we set their objectives. What I wouldn't like to see is a series of separate, well-intentioned documents prepared by individuals who are sort of specialists in their respective area, but that don't sort of speak to one another sort of across the agendas, as it were. So the work we're doing at the moment is very much focused on looking at how SPDs can address those sort of corporate agendas around climate change and inequality and regeneration. So, I mean, we will, for example, have SPDs covering sustainable drainage and diversity. And clearly, if you're producing one document that covers each, it's really important that they are scoped out carefully to ensure that you're addressing issues like, I mean, the issue of the uplands is the sort of the classic, would be one of those sort of classic cases that sort of spans the issue of sustainable drainage and flood resilience, but also biodiversity. So I think we need to do a really careful exercise of sort of scoping and objective setting around SPD production.
Brilliant, thank you.
Councillor Caffrey.
Thank you, Chair. You said, Richard, there's going to be a third stage to this process. Is that normal, or is that just for this case about supply? I think it was.
Yes, it's fairly. I mean, the Kirklees local plan. I might have this wrong, but I think that went to about 5 stages of hearings, and clearly there were issues that the inspector couldn't wrap up during the stage 2 hearings. And I mean, obviously, one of them was housing supply, because we talked about a lot of individual sites, and the inspector's post stage 2 letter raised some issues about some sites. So you have to bring all of that back into the round, as it were, to then come to a final view on housing supply. And the inspector also asked us to sort of commission some further evidence. So going to a third stage of hearings is, I would say, is quite normal.
I mean, the reason I ask is I understand there's still an awful lot of questions to be answered about housing supply, because you'll be aware. I mean, I've got a missive here for about 6 different groups, resident groups, and things about flawed figures and employment figures and the figures we've used aren't right and they're disputing them and all the rest of it. There's quite a lot of hoo-ha about that. So that could fundamentally change not only the plan, but the timetable. And I just wonder how that's going to fit in. I mean, the big elephant in the room is that the information that we're using to calculate supply is considered to be flawed, because look at inward migration, not growth within the borough. So if the inspector decides that, yeah, that's the case, that the housing supply or requirement have been inflated massively to suit the target. I mean, I think the concern is we're actually reverse numbers here. We're getting to figure out the numbers and then justify the numbers rather than doing the plan, then calculating numbers from what we've got. So it's kind of a reverse process for planning. And there's a lot of questions around that. And if that changes, this timetable is going to change, surely.
Well, that's more of that's more of a question around housing requirement than housing supply. I mean, it's probably wouldn't be appropriate for me to sort of get into the debate around housing requirement, but it did get quite a lot of airtime at the stage 2 hearings. But the issue of supply flows from the issue of requirement. If you've set your requirement at a given amount, you set your requirement at X, you then need to demonstrate that there is sufficient supply to meet that requirement. So I think the stage 3 hearings will be focused not so much on requirement, but whether there is actually sufficient supply of housing land to meet that requirement, and whether that land will come forward within the right time frame, which again is in itself is a complex issue. House builders, people whose land is not proposed to be released, would argue that there isn't sufficient supply, that the sites the council has identified won't come forward as quickly as we're saying, and therefore more land should be released. But that's, as I say, that's a matter for the planning inspector ultimately, and she will consider the submissions of all the different parties.
Yeah, we just need to be careful with our questioning, that we don't stray into any uncharted waters where we shouldn't be going. Specifically, I'm referring to the pre-election period that we're in. So I think we just do need to be careful with that, if I may.
Chair, I was talking about numbers methodology, not politics.
Yeah, it's just because the item is about the timeline, it's about the process, and I know you were referring to the numbers, but it's not really this isn't the correct forum for that discussion. Okay, Councillor Dickinson.
Thank you, Chair. Can I preface by saying if it looks like I'm veering off topic, please feel free to let me know, or if more appropriate, to have a written reply rather than a verbal one here for both yourself, Richard, and also for cabinet members who may wish to address this. In terms of the process, there is an argument to be made that to a certain extent the democratic process had been sidestepped, in that it was the decision to increase the housing requirement rather
Chair,
than...
this is straying off topic. I think you were very fair with your interjection in reply to the point that Councillor Caffrey was making and Richard Seaman dealt with, but I think you very fairly indicated that this needs to be on the timeline, the process and procedure, rather than the merits of any submissions that were made as part of the hearings that took place.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair enough. Thank you.
You know,
it's a difficult one to navigate.
Yeah, it's because it's obviously a council communication, so we could easily say we're saying it, but this is nonetheless going out via the council's YouTube channel, and I think that's where a lot of the issues lie.
No, that's I'm finding my way here. So
no, it's all right. But if it is a difficult balance to strike, and if there are questions like Ian has said, you know, we can easily put them in writing to officers. And also after the election, there's not going to be this issue until the next election. So I would do that as well. Okay. Councillor Holdsworth.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my question is to take Richard's point about the possibility of additional sites being released or possibly not, depending on the inspector's report. To what extent, when the implementation of the plan comes to fruition, is Calderdale Council going to encourage developers to build affordable housing for rent and for purchase when profit and selling prices may not be as high as if the developers were building larger
I think
properties?
that's straying into territory that isn't meant for this agenda item, I'm afraid.
I don't see why. I mean, I'm saying, is there going to be support for affordable housing rather than large developments, which do make developers more profits?
Councillor, you're asking an officer to comment on a position that the council may and may not take in response to the outcome of the local plan. And at this stage of that process, it's inappropriate for that to happen. It's inappropriate for an officer as well to indicate what the position of members might be in that situation. So it is a difficult question. I understand the constraints that members are struggling with this evening, but there is a need to recognise that this agenda item is about the process and procedure that's got the local plan to this point. Richard's indicated how it's to progress, and there are aspects of it that will continue to be discussed at further stages of all of this. And Councillor Holdsworth, your question is a very understandable, very good one, but it needs to be recognised that we're in this heightened sensitivity period where the council cannot be seen to be sort of indicating a position on a matter that inevitably will attract some comment and some controversy as to how to approach that difficult issue.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Of course, that there's the hearings afterwards. That's after the election, Councillor Holdsworth as well, and it would be perfectly right for you to raise that either outside of this forum or in those hearings. Councillor Kavanagh.
I'm nervous that Ian is going to tell me off, so I'll try and then just tell me off, Ian. I just wanted to clarify. So in stage 3, is it right, Richard, that you're saying stage 3 will be around you having to answer the inspector around transport infrastructure, housing supply, habitats regulation? Is that what you're saying stage 3 is about, and that you have to give a kind of reply around those particular issues in order to take us to the next stage? And is that correct?
Yes, broadly speaking, I mean the format for the stage 3 hearings will be very similar to the format for the stage 1 and 2 hearings, in as much as the inspector sets the agenda around the issues that she would like to be informed of, and she normally starts with the council, starts with a series of questions to the council that we endeavour to answer, and then she opens the discussion out to other parties, and obviously there's wide range of different parties have an interest. So yes, at the moment we think the issues will be around those things you've identified, but ultimately it'll be for the inspector to set the set the agenda, and all parties will have an opportunity to have a say at stage 3.
Okay, so my actual question was around which I didn't get to. Are you foreseeing any challenges within that could potentially lead to delays? Ian, is that okay? Yeah.
A sort of crystal ball sort of question. I mean, as I say, the ultimately it will be the inspector who makes the judgments around whether she's satisfied with the evidence that the council has submitted. I believe that our evidence is robust, and that it covers all of the issues raised by the planning inspector. But clearly, at those hearings, there will be an opportunity for the council to make its case, and there will be an opportunity for others to make their case. And it's the planning inspector who will decide.
Is that okay, Councillor Kavanagh?
That's fine. I'm not going to go with a third in case.
Perfect. Councillor Audrey Smith.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, is the decision of the inspector to take out the certain proposed development sites, is that not, well, I imagine it is normal, but is that final?
Well, what happens is that the inspector. So this is, I'm talking hypothetically here. So say you get through the hearings, you would never get a plan that goes through without any modification, and the inspector would say that this plan is capable of being found sound and legally compliant. However, in order to make it found sound and legally compliant, sorry, I'm getting my to make it sound and legally compliant, these modifications have to be made. Now, it is ultimately up to a council to make the decision on adoption, but a council can only adopt a plan in line with the planning inspector's conclusions around soundness and legal compliance and main modifications. If that makes sense. So it's the council that adopts the plan, but the council can't decide that it's going to adopt the plan with a different set of main modifications to those that are set out by the inspector.
Right, I suppose I'm just thinking about the allocation for housing and stuff like that. I don't know, I feel a bit confused that we're looking at all sorts of sites to build housing because we need to. Then the inspector's taken a whole load of sites out, and I'm just a bit confused about that and wonder what.
Which is not. There's but as I say, the link to the inspector's letter it's probably worth following that link, because the sites that she's actually raised concerns about are it's just a relatively small number of sites so far, but it is, and again I'm talking in general terms here, it's with every local plan there will be sites that don't ultimately make the cut because the inspector comes to a conclusion that sort of differs from the council. The key issue is clearly if the inspector concluded that 80% of your sites were fundamentally had an issue with them, then clearly the plan can't survive. It can't be found capable of being sound. Whereas if the inspector came to a conclusion that a relatively small number of sites weren't acceptable, that can be dealt with through the main modification process without sort of fundamentally undermining the plan. And as I say, I'm sort of talking hypothetically there.
Perfect. Okay then. Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Dickinson, you'd like another pop?
Another shot at the title. Right. It's not that long until May. If the hearings go ahead at that time, how I'm assuming that you'll be completing answering the queries that the inspector has for then. How and therefore their documents be released for consideration and consultation by other people. How close are you to finishing that process at your end?
Well, again, in the presentation, there's a link to the various documents that have been put out for comment. We've carried out 2 periods of consultation on documents, or whether consultation is the right word. It's an opportunity for the public to comment on what essentially, in the main, are evidence documents rather than sort of proposals. And there's one further tranche of evidence that we'll be making available early in April. The timeframes have been agreed with the inspector. She's content that she will have an opportunity to consider the representations that are made, and that she will then be able to issue the agendas for the meetings, appropriate time frame in advance of those hearings. I mean, what we're doing, we will simply be organising. People have made comments. We will organise them, sort of categorise them, and then just send them on to the inspector to consider.
Good. All right then. Final question from me. Just so I've got the timescales correct. So the council have to demonstrate a 5-year supply of houses. After the inspector makes a decision, at that point, so on the local plan, at that point, we then look at adopting, or then look at the charging schedule. Will there be hearings attached to that charging schedule? So will that charging schedule undergo another set of hearings after the plan's adoption?
Yes. So obviously I've talked through the process that would lead up to the various steps that would lead up to the adoption of a local plan. Community infrastructure levy has its own process, which also involves examination, obviously considering sort of different issues, primarily focused on issues around sort of the financial viability of the charging schedule. Now, whether the inspector would choose to do that as hearings or through a sort of written representation procedure, that would sort of remain to be seen. I think it would depend on the sort of the nature of representations that were made. But yes, it is a separate process of examination.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well, thank you very much. Councillor Blackburn, final comment.
Thank you, Chair. So whilst I appreciate we're in pre-election period, I'm a bit disappointed that we're not, the various groups have been given the opportunity to voice their concerns, which actually relate to some of the timescales as well. So I'm a little bit disappointed about that. So after the first inquiry, I do think that actually we needed to have a debate about the economic viability, and I think we do still need a discussion about employment, especially given the current economic situation. Is this going to happen concurrent with the stage 3 of the inquiry, or are we likely to see that after the stage 3, given the post-COVID situation? That's one of the issues. Equally, I like to think that the council do want to work with the public, but I've struggled to get my head around stage 3 with all the documents being uploaded, some at the last minute. So to question some of the timescales in terms of the punctuality of some of the documents being placed onto the website. So I struggle. So I don't know how other members and other members of the public have managed with that. I think likewise, I think we're still waiting to the timescale as to when it's going to be sound or viable, and a question as to the timescales for delivery. Given that we've not been able to deliver a few key projects that are vital to the local plan. So those are my comments. Hope they're not being political. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Richard, unless some of those are best being taken via written response.
If I can interject, Chair, I think they are.
Yeah, go on, Ian.
No, I just said I think they are, Chair, dealt with by written response.
Yeah, yeah. And I think actually, to be honest, more detail can be provided within a written response. So it's probably of benefit to you, Councillor Bagborough. Is that okay?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Richard, for doing that.
Is that okay, Richard, with you? Perfect. Right. Well, on that note, thank you to Richard for attending the meeting. I know it's a very difficult balance given the period we're in, and I just want to thank as well members. It's been quite a difficult balance to achieve, but I think we've done that quite well. So thank you to members for this, for the discussion really, and being quite fair with the questioning. So thank you very much. And so we've got the work programme next. Can I also thank Ian as well for making sure that we've stayed on the right line of the fence there. So thank you to Ian. Okay, the work programme. Mike, can I hand over to you?
Thank you, Chair. The only thing I wanted to mention about the work programme is that your report on the inequalities arising out of the pandemic is being considered by Cabinet on Monday evening, and Councillor Kavanagh, I've asked, and she's agreed, will present the report. It's not a big presentation, Councillor Kavanagh. I think if you stray across more than 1 minute or 2 minutes, Councillor Swift may be having a stern word with you. But that's the next stage in the process. And since the last meeting, we made some minor sort of typo amendments, and we've got it published in quite a nice format with some photographs as well. So that bit of work proceeds that way. Is Ian? I don't know if has Ian Hughes gone?
I think so. I should also say, Richard, by the way, if you do want to leave the meeting, you're more than welcome.
I was just slightly concerned that I'm not the host, am I now? Because if I'm the host, it ends the meeting for all. So I was just typing a message to query that. Can I just
quick leave? Quick.
Good point.
I am still the host, I think, Chair. Yeah.
Right. Try.
So I can leave. Thank you. Goodbye.
Perfect. Thank you.
I think, Chair, the other thing to add, and I'm not quite sure of the status of this, but as I've been here, there's a notice come through that the government has decided not to extend virtual meetings after May. So it may be that your next meeting is in committee room B, although I think there may be a legal challenge to that. But you could be doing face-to-face in June.
But yeah, on that bombshell, I didn't know that, Mike, if I'm honest with you. And obviously pre-election period.
I can't believe they don't run the decision by you.
Pre-election, I know. It turns out I've got no authority here. But, with regards to this, it's more of a discussion offline, really. But I think it's probably we can't really do anything to. I disagree with that, if I'm honest with you. And I think if we have a discussion offline between us Calderdale councillors, I think it's important that we do that, really.
Okay, Chair, we're still in the meeting because I know Councillor Smith, I think, has indicated she's got a...
Yeah, I've got Councillor Holdsworth and Councillor Smith.
Yeah, Mike, it was just a question. The assistant head teacher at Ryburn wondered if she would be able to have a copy of the report once it had been presented to Cabinet. Is that something that would be permitted?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. It's a public report. And Alex, have you got a note of that? But yeah, no, it's a public report, and we will be finding a way of presenting it on the council's website so that the report and the two annexes, is that what we called them, with the more detailed information, are easily available for people to access. And I think the other thing to report on that piece of work on inequalities, Chair, is we have submitted it. We've submitted a 600-word statement to the Centre for Public Scrutiny, looking to publish examples of recent scrutiny and examples of good practice. And so hopefully that summary will be published in the relatively near future.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you.
Yeah, let's keep updated about that one. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, it was really about an email I'd sent to George and Peter about the reviewing the previous scrutiny on housing. The one that you did, Jenny.
Yeah. So I know, because which area of interest is it, Councillor Smith? You've got a specific area of interest, don't you?
Well, we did the social housing scrutiny with, well, I did a little bit of it with Peter and Jenny, and it was just to go back and revisit to see if any of the recommendations have been taken up.
Can that be done in an actual scrutiny meeting?
I have absolutely no idea. I was asking.
Mike, surely it can be.
Yeah.
It can be done. It can be done in a. Sorry, do precisely what in a scrutiny meeting?
So, Councillor Smith has ran a review. Did you was this following our previous housing meeting in place?
No, no.
Yeah, we had a working party on it, didn't we, Audrey? And we made some recommendations. What is it, about 12 months ago? A bit longer, isn't it? Probably.
Yeah, longer, 2 years.
Yeah, there were recommendations. I think what's been asked is, council have a look at the recommendations and see if they've been sort of acted upon, and then discuss the scrutiny. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Mike.
We could set something up, offline, if you like, in a meeting between Councillor Caffrey and Councillor Smith and myself, and we could do that before the election, and then report back to the scrutiny board on that review, if you like, of the recommendations when we get back together in June.
Yeah, I think we need to review the recommendations before I come to scrutiny, because we need to see where we are on it. No, I accept that. Yeah, I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good, very good. So on that note, this is the last meeting before the elections. I just want to. We've received an email earlier today from Alex, and Alex is going on to pastures anew. Indeed, we're sorry, Alex, that you're going, but we would like to wish you the very best and congratulations on the new role. I know it's something you're incredibly passionate about.
Thank you.
And good luck in the future. Alex, do you want to say a few words?
Oh, I don't want to take up too much more of everyone's evenings, but I'll just reiterate some of the points I made in the email just for the meeting, and just say a big thank you to everyone for all of your support and encouragement over the past year or so, especially when things have got much more difficult over the challenges that COVID has presented, and sort of moving everything online. It's been a pleasure working with you all, and I've learned so much whilst in this position. I've really enjoyed it. My only regret is that I've only been able to meet and work with you all in person for just over 2 months before having to interact with everyone over a screen. But I'm really going to miss working at Calderdale and miss being a part of the Scrutiny team. So thank you again, everyone.
No, it's okay. Well, we're gutted that you're going, Alex, but yeah, we think it's progression's always a good thing, no matter where it is. So I think congratulations on the role. So yeah, and the other thing is elections are coming up. Some of us may be here after May, some of us may not be here after May. So, you know, if obviously I don't want to, I couldn't influence the election anyway, but I just want to say, you know, if you're not here, you'll be missed. If you are here, great. So I just want to say thank you to the board. Thank you to the board for everything you've done over the past year. I think we've been a really good team. We've got a lot done. And can I also thank Mike, in addition to Alex, and also Janet, Fazana, and all of committee admin for their hard work this year. It's been appreciated. Does any member want to comment on that or chip in?
Just to reiterate, thanks again. I think we have done loads of really good work. Alex, you know, I want to give you a personal thanks for all the hard work you did on that detailed review, because we couldn't have got it done without your support. So thank you so much. Yeah, and hope, you know, I hope that we all stay on place and continue after May. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank.
I just wanted to.
Sorry, I'd just like to thank the chair quickly. Mainly for not landing me in it as vice chair and making me chair too many meetings. And, you know, while party loyalty dictates that I hope I never see you again, all the best.
I'll put that as an endorsement. Councillor Holdsworth.
I just wanted to say a big thank you to Alex as well. He's been fantastic. So has Mike, and also I wanted to say thank you, George, for chairing. And I would like to see you back again. So fingers crossed. And I hope everybody who's up for election. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sue. I appreciate that, and we'll see. I'll see you on the other side. I'm not sure what the count arrangements are. Usually the count's a bit of a social occasion for me, so we'll see. I usually get told off for not exactly counting, but thank you very much to everyone.
We'll replace the Wetherspoons afterwards with cans in the car park. Are you going to close the meeting, Councillor Robbins?
Yeah. Sorry. Right. And I think on that bombshell, the meeting's closed.
Yeah. Thanks, Alex. Bye bye.
Janet, are you putting this stream
Thank
off?
you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Yeah. Good luck, George.
Good luck. See you later.
Bye.
Bye bye.
I've made you host, Janet, so you should be able to stop this stream now.
Let's just